All right. We are live with Radio Free Transarctica, coming across the great desert of the Antarctic like a winter storm of some kind. I have my two friends, Dave and Will, from the United Kingdom, visiting across the airwaves and or the fiber optics lines, as it probably more likely is. Welcome, guys, and we were just talking about coronavirus and things and stuff that everyone's talking about, but I started to think we ought to be recording this so people who are not us can hear what us has to say.
So the historians of the future can look back and marvel at our tremendous intellect.
Oh yeah, that's precisely what's going on. This is all for posterity. So, Will, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, where I was at with this continued and extended lockdown that we're all currently sitting in is that I don't know about alien audit or various other ideas like that, but something where I was at was and you'll notice if you look at the news articles reporting on it, you'll see that the talk is of it's going to be 3 weeks, and people then speculate that it'll be 3 months, and now they're talking about 6 months or more. And my not fear, but something that I'm immensely skeptical and wary of is that actually what this is going to become a new normal. We've already seen, and they are perfectly reasonable requests, but we are already seeing changes to the legal system whereby it's like we're under a daytime curfew, where now the authorities have the ability to search and ask questions about why you're leaving the house. And if everyone gets used to that, and that then becomes normalized, once this is all over, if indeed it ever is allowed to be over, it may well continue. It's a stepping stone towards the big scary police state. But I think it is genuinely something worth real concern now.
Yeah. I agree with you a lot that is the danger that is presented. I think that this is the problem that I have with the main narrative. I might repeat some of what I was just saying because just so it gets onto the audio here. The thing is that whatever the public story is, the current public story is bullshit in some way. It's really hard for us to tell which part is the bullshit. That's the problem that everyone's having, because everyone smells the shit. They just are not sure whose shoe it's stuck on. So it's
to some
mouth
extent,
is spewing out of.
to some extent, a lot of people are already fairly solid in their minds exactly where the shit is, and a lot of the blame's now being pointed at China. There's a lot of strong anti-Chinese sentiment being grown out of this. Now, I'm not saying it's intentional or this, that, and the other, but it's definitely happening, and it's definitely an observable effect.
It may very well be intentional, because the trade war with China did not, with the United States and China, did not receive. First of all, it was a bad idea to begin with, because the global economy was so closely tied together before Donald Trump came into office and started slapping tariffs on things and all this. The global economy was so interconnected, no one could really afford to go to war with anyone, because they were dependent on everyone else for their money. But the thing is that China has so many people and so many resources, and America has so many resources and much fewer people, but we have so many resources that we are capable of running ourselves. We don't need anyone else. And the dick measuring contest of Xi Jinping and Donald Trump comes out to whose micropenis is smaller. they're they're going to really fuck everything up this way. And I've been listening to, for example, Joseph P. Farrell. Dr. Joseph P. Farrell is one of my favorite commentators, and everyone should just look him up if they don't know who he is, because he's a prolific writer and has done amazing work, very well annotated, very well cited work, with huge bibliographies that you can read everything that he's cited, and usually his sources are very good too. And he quoted the other day some Chinese general who, I'm not sure what the source of this was, but there was some article where a Chinese general's speech had been translated, and he said that in Chinese history that one thing was known for sure, and that is that two tigers cannot live on the same mountain and live in peace. And people have been talking about a U.S. versus China new world order, but that's kind of, Russia's not the Soviet Union anymore, so the world is kind of weird if it's unipolar, because that's just not how magnetism works. You got to have two poles to anything. You got to have long and short, or hot and cold. So I feel like they're establishing these separate blocks in essentially George Orwell's 1984 scenario of it's necessary to establish these different geographical political blocks so that there is a kind of counterbalancing of power.
It's like having a common set of goals or a common set of objectives, and at the moment I think China are staged to be the new Russia, if that makes sense. But for the last few decades, Russia have been the big bad, so to speak, and I think that's sort of run its course to the point where now China are the big bad.
Yeah.
But I think that's more of as a shift towards, well, not necessarily economic restructure, but it's a shift towards not relying on slave labor exports from third world countries, and it gets touted like it's dick waving between two dictators, but I think the truth is a lot deeper than that.
Well, that is certainly true. We just don't have time to. We have to simplify in some ways. We just don't have time to go into it. But it's not just. It's not just a dick waving contest. I think what it really is that competition breeds progress, and basically both sides of the Cold War, Soviet Union and the United States, both realized that the Cold War was a valuable tool to them to drive progress. And progress, like the post 9/11 world, progress has not been, there's been a lot of changes, but not what people would call real progress in terms of bettering human living standards. Like our living standards are not actually very much better than they were in the 1950s or the 1920s, for that matter. They've improved. It's just.
I think it's a case of where it's improved. If you look at the things like, and I'm not a big fan of the class system, so to speak, but the gap between lower and higher has definitely narrowed tenfold since the 50s.
Maybe
so
in the United Kingdom.
You or me, well, people like you or me, probably, not much has changed, but people who work in factories, they've now got all the same mod cons and things that we do.
Oh yeah.
The class divide I know in America goes pretty wild. Like over here, you're middle class if maybe you earn 60K a year and you own your own house, whereas in America land it looks like middle class people have their own boats and lakes and things, which is pretty fucking wild.
I mean, well, I don't know if that's true.
But that's just what we see on, that's what we see of America, and I know
Right.
that's a very
Well,
poor
see,
show. In many ways, that's like what we know of China is what we get shown.
right, and that's one of the things. That's one of the tricks of the American media, because the thing is that literally half of America is living below the poverty line, and
Oof.
the like literally half the country is in a state that is it's livable. I mean, no one in the United States is starving really. I've done a lot of work with the homeless in Portland and in Reno before I moved to Portland, and there are a lot of homeless people, but it's because it's easy to. It's not that difficult to be homeless right now. You don't have to fight that hard to survive. People are dicks and people are terrible to each other, but all in all, if you need some food, there are enough kind people in this city and in this country that you can be fed every day just by asking. You don't need money strictly to survive, and America, most of America is blessed with pretty good weather, at least 9 months out of the year, and where you could live outside. I mean, there's a good portion of America that's not true for, but for example, the reason why homelessness is so big on the West Coast, and particularly in California and Oregon, and even in like Hawaii, is that if you live in Hawaii and you're homeless, then just go sleep on the beach, man. It's awesome. Like, what's there to be? Like just buy a tent. Because anyone can earn the $20 to $40 it takes to buy a cheap tent. Anyone can do that. You could beg on the street corner and make that if you had to, and especially if you had to. People are very good at smelling out people that actually like need money and people that are charlatans.
Do you get that? You see people pretending to be beggars?
Oh yeah, yes,
oh,
absolutely.
Wow.
I've seen videos of it in that.
Yeah,
I suppose we get the crackheads over here, don't we?
Well,
you get professional homeless over here who live in a house, get the train into London, spend the day begging because you can get more money sat on the floor begging in the underground than working a minimum wage job.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, that's true. That's true in the United States as well, because people, for example, especially in Silicon Valley, or when I was living in San Jose, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there were people there was this guy who would stand on the street corner, and it literally just on a meridian in the middle of the road, and just held a sign that had something pathetic written on it. And he looked pathetic, but I talked to him multiple times, and he was out there because he made six figures. He made over $100,000 a year, because people around there were generous, because that was a rich area, and they were like,
it's an affluent place, yeah.
So they were generous, and he actually was out of work and actually was homeless and hungry and stuff when he started holding the sign. But the thing was that he realized that he could make so much money.
It's so lucrative. Why would you give it up?
Yeah, why would you go back to being a carpenter or back to being an electrician or whatever? You make good money. You make $40, $50 an hour. You have good health benefits and stuff. But if you're standing on the side of the road and making $200 an hour,
It's no drug testing for standing on the side of the road.
But that's not true. That's not true everywhere. And the majority of American poor people That is not true for. And the reason why is that the majority of the American poor do not ask for money, and they just go on being poor, and that's okay.
See, that's very strange. Like over here, people are quite ready to jump on and ask for those sort of things.
I love America a lot, and one of our cultural things is we love freedom. We love freedom and God and being free.
Well, I guess part of that freedom is not relying on, well, for want of a better word, not relying on handouts, I guess.
Not relying on handouts, not relying on the government. Those are big. Those are big traditions. I mean, those are American traditions. The reason why they kicked out King George, well, the official reason was, they're just taxing us. He's taxing us 3 cents on tea or whatever. But it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that England would make whatever laws and they would apply to the United States, and the United States didn't have any say over them. So
absolutely. Well, that's where we ended up with Europe, and well, I've got to be careful saying that. That's spicy, apparently, that kind of opinion. But that is where we ended up with the European Union. It comes back to that. And I guess it is an American ideal to some extent, the ideal of self-governance and not being privy to the whims of a separate foreign state.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for Brexit personally. I think that free trade is good. But
if I could, I'd just attach a big motor to the side and just push England over towards you guys a bit.
Well,
get some nicer weather,
yeah,
bigger fish.
Yeah, just push it out to Bermuda.
Oh, yeah, hit me up with Bermuda. I've already got the shorts.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's I don't know, I feel like the United States and England, in truth, I mean, today, it's almost like the American Revolution didn't happen. Like, we're pretty much
we're
in
still
the same
buddies.
country. Yeah, we're well within the same political region, and I think that's mostly a good thing. But
I think it is.
When it comes to all the stuff with coronavirus, I think that so the UK government and the United States government, federal government, were somewhat resistant to putting plans in place at first, and it has to do with being resistant to shutting down the economy. Obviously, everyone should be worried about the economy being shut down for obvious reasons. But the thing that this is what we were talking about, where it's trying to figure out what shoe the bullshit's on, trying to figure out what exactly is the thing that's going on. They're restructuring something, and obviously they are restructuring the government in a certain sense. And what I'm seeing happen though is that what happened with the United States Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve is that the United States Treasury Department basically took over the Federal Reserve, which was previously had private had a private board of directors, and now Steve Mnuchin, who's the head of the Department of the Treasury, now he's in charge, and that means that the President of the United States is in charge, and that means that because the world is addicted to the petrodollar, which is a very sad state of affairs, and I have very strong opinions about Saudi treatment of people and Saudi Aramco as a company and all kinds of things like that. But the fact is that the world is addicted to the petrodollar, and it shouldn't be, because the world doesn't need to use petrol anymore, really. It doesn't need oil in the ways that it used to.
We haven't needed that since the advent of the nuclear submarine. We've got nuclear-powered engines that fit in boats. So why is all of our international shipping still relying on petrol? Like, that doesn't make any sense. There's no real way to cut that unless we're going to open up a gate about serious control of the petrodollar, like you said.
Well, the reason is because Saudi Aramco is the single most profitable company on earth. Saudi Aramco makes over $100 billion every year.
And somebody has got an awful lot of shares and a vested interest in maintaining that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and let me remind everyone what Saudi Aramco stands for. It stands for the Saudi Arabian American Oil Company. It's not just the Saudi Arabian Oil Company. It's the Saudi Arabian American Oil Company, and it's the Saudi Arabian American Israeli coalition, which essentially runs the world right now. And the city of London, the city of London is is the big financial center of this.
And you mean the real city of London?
I mean
London.
the proper city of London, the one.
Yeah.
So
not many people know about that. I'm surprised that you do.
Well, yeah, not many people know that the city of London proper is actually pretty small, and as I understand it, it's a walled city. There's a wall that goes around it, and even the Queen apparently has to ask permission and be met and brought in to the city of London.
Very much so.
And so people need to understand that even the Queen of England asks permission to enter the city of London. That's the financial hub of the entire world. It's being run through there, and that goes back to the Jewish Venetian Templar, Knights Templar banking cartel. It's not only Jews. People make a big mistake.
Rosicrucians and stuff.
Oh yeah. The Rosicrucianism was a big part of it. I've personally been associated with the ancient mystical order Rosii Crucis in the United States since I was a child, really, going to their Egyptology museum.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I loved their Egyptology museum so much, and I was counting the days till I would become 18 so that I could sign up to become a Rosicrucian. So there, banking goes back. Modern banking was essentially invented by the Knights Templar at the time of the Crusades, and when the King of France executed all the Templar and confiscated their worth and their value, that money did not just disappear, and those things did not just disappear. So a certain banking family by the name of Rothschilds ended up being the ones who were taking it over. So the Rothschilds banking family, which everyone knows, Rothschilds means Red Shield, and the shield is the Shield of Solomon, which is the Star of David. But this is not about Jews and Judaism. It's just that these people happen to be Jewish. So they ended up taking over.
Screen.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a smokescreen to kind of protect the identities of, so they ended up running all the central banks of the world, and eventually they ended up being in on this petrodollar thing through the United Kingdom and the founding of Israel, and their close ties to New York and London and to Israel, and since 9/11, we've been slowly but surely engaging in military action and overthrowing every single country that doesn't want to be involved with the petrodollar. Oh, exactly.
That's a real chin scratcher, that one.
Well, it's basically it's just classic mafia tactics, really. It's what happens is
basically on a bigger scale.
Yeah, it's just really big scale mafia tactics. They say, hey, you got to pay your protection money. They say, I can't pay today. I'll pay next week. I'll pay. I'll get the money. I just. But it's not about money. It's about resources. They want to suck third world countries' resources dry and use them for whatever they want. and that has to do with this, funding the secret space program, things like that. But what I was getting to about the Rothschilds bankers is that what we're seeing now with the coronavirus and what we saw with the election of Donald Trump in 2016, and what year was Brexit voted on? 2017 or 2015? I forget because it's been such a long
I
process.
can't remember now. It was 3 ages ago. We only actually came out in January.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's insane how long it took. After the people voted, and then they were like, "Do you guys really want to? Really?" Like, and it's like, yeah, of course. But anyway, that coup, essentially, what that represents is a shift in the deep state powers of what we could call the Anglo-American bloc. And the Anglo-American Israeli bloc, where Saudi Arabia is a big important part of that too, that power has shifted with the shift of power from the king in Saudi Arabia to the crown prince. We see power shifting away from Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. We see power shifting away from I guess it's the Tories who are the ones who I don't know British politics very well.
Yeah, it is.
So it's the Tories that traditionally were, like, Margaret Thatcher was a Tory and all that.
Yes.
And so it's a movement away from that, and in the United States, it's a movement away from this what I call the Clinton cartel, but it's really Clinton, Bush, Kennedy.
It's the Bohemian Grove Club.
Yeah, Bohemian Grove Club, you could say. And but there's a movement away from that, and there's a lot of reasons for it some of them are very sick and disturbing. Things about the Bohemian Grove Club and practices that they engage in that people were disgusted to do business with them. Someone steps in. Donald Trump is not what I would call a respectable businessman, but he is a businessman, and people would. He had a reputation for being a hard-nosed, hard negotiating, hard dealing guy who'd made his life's fortune on basically not giving a shit and just telling people how it was going to be. And so they chose the perfect spokesman for the United States to say, like, fuck you. Like, the deep state essentially decided. And the deep state, when we say the deep state, it's all these career bureaucrats who are working in the United States intelligence agencies and MI6 in the UK, or a list of councils like the Trilateral Commission and Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, and I'm sure there's the Cecil Rhodes Foundation in the UK, and etc. that have certain like think tank groups where they try to settle these issues. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the deep state. These people are in it as a career, and they're the power behind the throne, so to speak, in basically everywhere that they are. And they just decided it's time for a new king. It's time because the old one was getting a little power crazy. Blood sacrifices, satanic rituals.
The old one, the old one. I think the arrogance doesn't quite cover it to the point where you're going to have the entire world's media at your beck and call to destroy the image of your opponent and to tell people that you've got. I mean, you don't see predictions like a 99% chance to win coming anywhere but your friends. Nobody else would have any kind of expectations on any election result like that. Now, you could see who's playing on which teams, and you can see very much that the team that's winning has just changed.
Yeah, that's basically that's what it is. It's a power shift within the deep state. I just turned off a fan. I'm sorry that that fan was there. Someone was commenting in the that there was static going on. But
That does sound much better, actually.
okay, that is good. I'm sorry about the fan. I just slipped my mind. There's so much else going on, you know. So when this coronavirus thing is happening, what I see is that it is the, let's say, cementing of this new faction.
Yeah.
This new faction essentially now with the takeover of the Federal Reserve, they now write the checks and not the Rothschilds. And that is a huge.
Curious to see how that's going to end up for them.
It's going to be strange. We would not be amiss to think that maybe lots and lots of people are going to be dumping the dollar.
Yeah.
And that the dollar.
And there's going to be a lot of panic around that.
There's going to be a lot of panic, and things in America might get very bad. It could. But if they're handling it intelligently, and I have seen indications from Trump and from the government that seems to indicate that they are handling it in a. I don't want to give these people too much credit, but they're not being indecent about it to a massive degree. They're being they're at least, for example, sending people checks, helping people with unemployment and stuff. That is good, but
yeah, I was pretty shocked to see that you guys were going to get the helicopter money bailouts before we were.
Oh,
I thought for sure we would see that first, but we didn't.
I would have bet money on it with you. But you know what did it? I on March 21st, which was my birthday, my 30th birthday, I tweeted to Donald Trump. I said, "Dear Donald Trump," let me see if I can read. Let me read this tweet for you. I said, well, I guess it's not on my page, but I basically just said, "Dear Donald Trump, I have been a very good citizen this year, and it is my birthday, and I have one wish, and I wish that you would send everyone in America a check for $1,000, please and thank you. Love, Lex White." So I claim credit. I'm claiming credit for that.
Like going ahead then, are you all getting a check for $1,000? Is that?
We're getting 1,200. So a little.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. My rent is $550 a month. So that's 2 months rent and a little extra. That's not bad.
That's decent. Yeah, that's decent.
It's interesting that the way America has chosen to give the cash directly to the citizens, whereas in the UK they've let us not pay for things. So people are getting mortgage holidays or rent holidays and stuff, or businesses that would have to lay people off. The government are going to pay people's wages to not have to go to work so that the businesses don't close. So some people are going to be off work on full money. But it's interesting how rather than just give the cash directly to the people, so they then spend it, some of which goes on tax and goes back to the government. They're just
the
pressure from the other end.
You know what the truth is? So in the 1980s in the United States, there was a policy called Reaganomics, or trickle-down economics, which was the idea that if rich people had money, they would spend it on employing people, and the money would trickle down. But the truth is that we have a trickle-up economy, and if you put the money down at the lowest level, everyone's going to spend it, and that money goes into the pockets of people in higher and higher levels. So when they were looking at how can we keep the people from revolting and going into open rebellion, which is pretty much, it's still on the table, but they're doing everything they can to prevent it. And the way that they're doing it, they said, if we want to feed pigs, we gotta water the grass. So Mitt Romney was the intelligent man behind this decision, and I give him great credit for being a Mormon in this case. I am also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I love the LDS Church for a lot of the things that it does. It has billions and billions of dollars. They have I think a $100 billion investment fund. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're neck and neck with the Vatican for the richest church in the world, and they take very good care of their members. And I have been witness to that personally as someone who was homeless and living in a van down by the river, literally down by the river in Reno, Nevada. And I converted to the LDS faith, and I received a great deal of support and help and love from those people. And the idea of it is fundamentally an LDS idea, which back in the 1800s, in the 1830s, the Mormons were basically communists before communism existed. This was before Karl Marx, and they held all property in common. Everyone donated everything they had to the church, and the church gave it back to them in according to whatever anyone needed. And that's essentially how communist government works, except that a church is a voluntary organization, whereas a state is not a voluntary organization. They put a gun to your head and they say, this is how it's going to be, or else we shoot you, or else we put you in jail, or else, etc. They use the threat of violence. But to the LDS Church's credit, what they have that system, but it's voluntary. It says, like, if you want to be a member of this, here's how you do it. You pay 10% tithing of all the money that you make, and then in return you receive all the social benefits of being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's a 10% tax, and then in return you know that you never have to worry about where you're going to sleep, and you never have to worry about what you're going to eat, because no matter where you go in the world, anywhere in the world, you can find an LDS family that is willing to have you sleep on a mattress or on their couch or on the floor, and they're willing to give you a loaf of bread. And that's communism. That's real communism, not
the communism in the commune sense.
In the sense of
communism.
So communalism, you could say.
Yeah.
It's not. It's different than the. It's not that different from Marxian communism, but it's different than what people associate with Marxian communism, which is Russian communism. It's much different than
Russian communism. More I guess the word Bolshevik. Bolshevism?
Bolshevik. Well, see, this is a misunderstanding that a lot of people have about communist parties. Communist parties never actually said that their country is communist. Of
course not.
They were trying to achieve communism. That's a different goal entirely. Their goal was to achieve communism in the end, but there's steps that you have to take. You can't just go from an agrarian society to a communist society. You have to industrialize first. And that's what happened to the Soviet Union, and that's what happened to Cuba, and that's what happened everywhere that communism is. China, that's exactly what happened with China, is that they were essentially, at the end of World War II, they were war-torn by the Japanese and essentially still an agrarian economy. And the Communist Party said, well, we're going to fix this shit up. And they industrialized that whole nation at a rate, no one but China and Japan has industrialized so quickly. In China, even faster than Japan. Really, Japan had a, you know, almost 100-year head start on them.
Yeah, and
And
not to mention all of the help post World War.
yeah, I mean, they were deeply hurt by the Second World War.
Yeah,
And there's no denying that. And I think everyone on every side of that war should be ashamed of themselves. They should not feel pride.
yeah.
No one should feel pride
No.
about that war. That was a shameful war for everyone. For everyone. Every single side of that.
It was
There's no.
really, it was an echo of the previous one.
And yes, it was. And it was the step that the nuclear bombs were the step that that brought the extraterrestrial attention to us again. They've been visiting for a very long time, and they monitor us, and we have very close connections with them. I know a lot about this, and a lot of people don't believe me when I talk about it, but essentially there's a galactic government, and this solar system actually does have a king, and it is the person that people would call Jesus. This is essentially the belief of the LDS Church. If you're not familiar, it's just that I'm saying it in blatant terms, literal terms. These are things that normally would only be talked about in a temple because they're sacred. And that also means at this time that they're secret for the same reason that Masons keep secrets, which is not everything is beneficial for people to know. There's certain... You have to wait for the right time to tell someone some things, because if they're not ready for them, it can really ruin the party. You know what I mean? But the thing is that disclosure is happening, and it has a timeline. It's just a pretty slow timeline. So ever since the 1950s, there was a ramp up of all of these pop culture. I mean, this is going back. It goes back to the beginning of film media and everything. I mean, there were airship sightings in the 1890s. They were interested in us.
Oh man, there's sightings all the way back to the Middle Ages.
Oh yeah, back to the Middle Ages, to Rome, to ancient China. And then every country talks about flying chariots. Going back to the Mahabharata, going back to in India, then the Vedas, going back to Babylon and Sumer, going back to Egypt. I mean, it's because they were always with us, because we're their children, essentially. This planet is a child. It's a cradle. It's the womb that we're being grown in. We're growing up. But at this point, up until this point, we've been kept in this zoo, or this bubble, where they wanted to maintain our natural habitat to allow us to grow. But now we've reached a point where we've started to fuck up our natural habitat. So they're deciding that, okay, this is basically the point where they have to step in and say, okay, there's actually a way that these things work, and you guys are not allowed to fuck up this planet, and we wouldn't let you do it. And so we're just going to help you fix this, and we will guide you into becoming a member of this galactic community. That is what's happening. And when Donald Trump was put into office, and I happen to know this for a fact, really, Donald Trump is an extremely suggestible person. He takes suggestions. He listens to everybody. He listens to everybody that says anything in his earshot. He's actually a very smart man. People do not give him very much credit. But what the extraterrestrials knew about him was that he was suggestible telepathically. He was even telepathically suggestible. So he could be he was the most easily controlled candidate for their purposes because he was telepathically suggestible, and I have also pretty much found this to be the case. I have tried and succeeded at telling Trump things telepathically and then see them done like the next day. This is he listens. He actually does listen. And that's what people don't understand about what's happening in the United States. People are saying he's a dictator and whatever, but with the people who count, I'm sorry to the masses, but the people who count are really the people who are in the know. And if everyone who's listening to this right now, you are in that group or joining that group by listening to this. You are being initiated, whether you know it or not. The initiation comes through learning these things, and everyone has initiation experiences that go with that. They'll be contacted individually, separately, by various entities and things like that. It's just something that happens. Once you reach a certain level, then someone comes and talks to you and says, "This is how it actually is, and this is what you need to know for your next step." You never receive the information of the full picture, and the reason why is that the infinite universe is of such complexity that if you could see the full picture of it with your human mind, it would literally blow your mind. It would literally destroy you. That's why, for example, when God sees Moses on the mountain, comes down to Moses, and Moses asks to see God, and God says, "Go into that rock crevice and cover your face, and I'll pass by you, and you can see my back parts, but you cannot see my face, for no man can see my face and live." No man can behold the face of God, which is the true complexity of the universe, and continue living a normal life of whatever they were. They would be so changed by the experience immediately that they would merge with God and become one with God and experience something called theosis, the process of becoming God themselves. So in order to prevent that from happening, because God's gravity is like a black hole times a million, it's infinite. His gravity is infinite, but he has infinite power to separate and distinguish things. So he places these veils, protective veils, between you and him. It's in Islam, they say that there are 10,000 veils between you and God, and there are no veils between God and you. And that's the truth. God looks directly into your life, but you see God through 10,000 veils. And the reason why is for your own protection. The same reason that you would use a veil of protection when you would go into a radioactive room. Radioactivity would simply kill you. You don't want to land on the sun as a human being, because landing on the sun, you would be incinerated instantly. There's just things that are too powerful for you, and you don't want to be plugged into that outlet. You know what I mean? So when we're talking about the process, it's a process of eternal improvement. It's called eternal progression. Joseph Smith called it eternal progression. And basically the process of eternal progression is the process of every moment make that moment better, be a better person in that moment than in the previous one. And if you can follow a trajectory like that through eternity, you will be an enlightened one. You will be an ascended master. You will be a Buddha. You will be a Christ. you will be those things. It's inevitable because the universe is infinite, and if you can keep an upward tick, you will eventually get there. You will eventually get there. It's only a matter of time. And the thing about time is that time is an illusion of dimension. Time is actually a fourth dimension that has a beginning and end. They're not actually a beginning and end. There's a beginning and end to what we call this universe, but it's basically just one blip on a sine wave. This universe is just one blip on a sine wave, and then there will be a negative blip underneath, and then it will repeat. But it's cyclical in nature. But at the end points of this wave, where the wave contacts the zero line, that's what you would call the beginning and end of time, as we're talking about our universe. God has it set up so that we experience time linearly. We go through it in a direction, and we have a vector through time. And the reason that we have a vector through time is so that we can have a series of experiences, and it's just a way of experiencing things, but everything that exists already exists. In the fourth dimension, the end exists as soon as there is a beginning. There's no difference between any of them because you have a view of the entire line. You have a view of the entire timeline of a thing. And so the fact that every single one of you and us, if we improving every moment, and I truly believe that everyone is, whether they know it or not, we're improving every moment. And if the end point, everyone will be a god in a certain sense. There'll be a king, there'll be a god, there'll be a Christ, there'll be a Buddha, and those gods are so powerful that they can reach back in time to you today and pull you forward. They are pulling you forward to become them. That is the process of initiation. It's actually your own self that initiates you. Your own self nature in the future is so strong and powerful, so divine, so close to divinity, that its gravity pulls you into it. You must go there. You must become a god, and must become a king, and must become, or queen, you must become those things, because that's your destiny. And destiny's gravity is not broken. But within the confines of destiny, you have free agency, which is different than free will. Free will implies that you have complete independence of will, which is not true. You don't have complete independence of will. There is an end that will happen, but you have free agency to go about it however you wish. You're going to reach that end no matter what. It's just that you can take whatever detours and sidetracks you want, and all roads will lead to Rome.
With everyone being permitted slightly more time and room for introspection, are you anticipating more people waking up to this idea?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that gradually, what is referred to as the golden millennium, which is going to begin soon, if it hasn't already. I guess
I think it has.
It's just going to get better from here. The media in the world is all about dragging people down um, in an effort to, let's say, prevent the pressure of it from bursting people, from bursting. Like it's like when you have a dam and you have all this water that's held back. You can't just blow up the dam because it will flood everything. You have to let the water trickle out. So you have to open up the floodgates and let the water even out. That's what's happening right now. Is coronavirus is not a real thing, not a real threat to anyone more than the flu. But the idea of coronavirus is a golden thing. It's a key. It is a mechanism, a catalyst for this change. It's for the floodgates to be opened. So in this time, everyone is isolated from each other. And that means that everyone has to sit a little bit more with themselves. Everyone has to spend a little bit more time thinking, like, what am I even doing? What am I even doing here? And that pathway is the process that will bring people to awakening. Everyone in the world right now is starting to learn about self-improvement because the circumstances of the virus has forced everyone indoors, forced everyone into seclusion, forced everyone into this fear state. So there's two angles to this. There's always two poles. Good and evil are not real things. They're not separate. I mean, they're not separate. God created everything, both the good and the evil, because evil serves a purpose. The purpose is to spur on good. It creates an incentive for good.
Without evil or good, you would have nothing by which to measure the other against.
Exactly. You need to have two poles in order to have a spectrum, a line that you can delineate the differences on. And because of this, the spectrum that we're going through, we're receiving all of this evil pressure from, for example, the Jews, who are God's chosen people. What does it mean that they're God's chosen people? It means that He's using them for a special task. And that special task involves things that make people hate them. But they...
Is it a necessary evil? Yeah.
But they're a necessary thing. They're like a cattle prod. You know, it's a necessary evil when you're trying to keep a herd together.
Well, it's one of this. It's something that I'm pretty sure I've spoken to Dave about before. Was when you're trying to come up with, you sit there and you drink and you put the world to rights, and you're always trying to come up with, well, my solution to the world's problems is to do X, Y, Z. And the actual truth is that if we as a species are going to outlive this planet or our solar system, we do need to be organized and managed and maintained at a international or global level, which is going to require an international or global government. And how do you implement that? Well, you don't just roll a load of tanks down the street overnight. You have to slowly trigger a series of events across the world in varying stages of urgency and move your way slowly there. And I see this latest lockdown, if you like, is simply another step towards normalizing what will become a new regime. But not because it's evil and that these people hate us or anything like that, but because it's necessary. And despite being necessary, it doesn't mean that there won't be some kind of resistance to it.
That's That's exactly right. Basically, I think your interpretation is right on the money as far as this goes. It takes a lot of dominoes, you know, takes a lot of
Yeah,
dominoes, but when the first domino falls, they all fall. It just takes a lot of preparation, takes a lot of care, and I gotta hand it to people like the Clintons. You know, I gotta hand it to them that they took care of business, and some pretty dirty business was done. And I know that punishment will happen for things that were not necessary. Any
oh,
unnecessary
absolutely.
evil, any unnecessary evil at all, uh, will be absolutely punished by the utmost justice. The justice of God is absolute, and and so prices will be paid by certain people who thought that they could do anything, and they could do anything that they
Yeah,
wanted, and no one.
using the necessaries that they're already on the path to doing to achieve secondary goals or motivations. Absolutely, that is amongst the reprehensible.
Yeah. So that's something that humanity has to change its mind about. The uh, the the word repentance in the Bible, in the Greek Septuagint, it is rendered as metanoia. Metanoia meaning beyond the mind, or uh, to move beyond the mind, or to change the mind.
Mm.
So the the act of changing the mind about certain things is the act of repentance. So when people do something bad and then decide, this was not optimal,
Yeah,
they repent. And when we're talking about optimal mobility, the um, the word sin in Greek, hamartia, means, as in archery, to miss the mark. It means literally to do something suboptimally. So,
to miss your intentions.
right. So, God likes optimal systems. Everyone likes optimal systems. Optimal systems are the best for everybody, period. But free agency exists. And so people have the ability to be suboptimal. And everyone is suboptimal in some respect. Everyone is suboptimal in some respect to how they could be. But we're all in a process of being perfected. And as we're being drawn toward our future selves, the gravity of our future selves, uh, the beautiful beings that we will become, that itself lifts us up and changes us into someone who is worth being. And so in Isaiah, I believe it's Isaiah 1:18, God says, "Come, let us sit and reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, I will make them white as wool." So everyone has a
It,
past that is sinful and filled with blood. Everyone.
or maybe even beyond the physical act of a sin, in that case, where he says to reason with me, or that we will reason together, means that maybe, as far as the person he's talking to, the sins he's talking to aren't necessarily actions, but ideals or logical reasoning that is a sin by way of it's missed its mark. And
Absolutely.
that by reasoning together, we will correct that.
Absolutely. That's that's essentially what's being said. Is that yeah, you've been suboptimal, but let us reason together, and we'll correct it, and we'll get better, and we'll improve, and every day you can improve yourself. Every day you can be better than yesterday. You can go outside, you can go running, you can go jogging, you can do yoga, you can do Tai Chi, you can go rock climbing, you can ride a bike, you can go hang gliding, you can go parasailing, you could go skydiving, you could go scuba diving. You could do anything that you want in this world. Uh, this world is like the very best video game ever, but everyone is stuck staring at screens. Everyone is stuck staring at this little box that tells them something instead of looking around and realizing that, oh, it would be a lot more fun than this ATV racing game if I just went and rode an ATV around. And there's some people who are disabled and they're not able to do that. And so for them, video games are great. And people, and they're a great developmental tool for children as well. But a part of growing up.
I'm kind of on mixed grounds with how I view technology and in particular video games in that sense, because like when you mentioned a lot of people are stuck with these devices that tell them things. From my viewpoint, I tell the computer. The computer doesn't tell me diddly squat.
Right.
The computer in my hands is another tool in much the same way that you would have a pen or a paintbrush.
Well,
it's very good at building optimized systems, and in part that's what I do for a living. But even from an artistic standpoint, if you permit me to put my wank hat on for a moment, they hold the potential to be the greatest form of creative expression. Obviously, I'm not talking about your Call of Duties and your Gran Turismos and those kind of games. I'm talking games that don't get made with the intention of, okay, we're going to make a video game and we're going to sell it and we're going to make money and this is a video game. You can see the good games are made with the intention of, I'm going to make an experience that you can that the player experiences on a level that you don't get with a television or with a painting or with a piece of music. You get the entire package all at once.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
In terms of it, you get an awful lot of creative expression through that. And I think so. As a medium, I think it's absolutely incredible and wonderful.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Should we be putting kids in front of them all day? No, absolutely not. Obviously, I didn't grow up with computers. Computers came much later into my life. We didn't get the internet until, Christ, I think I left college by the time we had internet connected in our village. Like, nobody had computers. And old good, new bad, ugh, bash some rocks. But there is an element of truth to that. If you end up sitting kids in front of computer screens all day, you end up being very hyper-stimulated. We see an increased rate in things like attention deficit disorder. And then you get to the point where kids don't know how to go outside and ride an ATV or a bicycle because they just play Fortnite all day.
That's true.
And that's somewhat worrying. And I see this, and I see it happen to the same kinds of people who come home from work and spend all the evening watching television. It's equally as bad in my mind.
This touches on a problem that humanity has in general, and all living things have to some degree, and that is if you have a button that you could press that instantly makes you happy, you would press that button.
I'll be spamming that button all day.
And we do have that button. And that button is called dopamine.
Yes.
We do
serotonin
and dopamine when we
are the great drivers of human nature.
Exactly. Humans are hormone-driven beings.
Absolutely.
We're just biological computers. People don't understand this well enough, but the entire universe is based on binary, because a thing either is or it isn't. That's a 0 or a 1.
Well, quantum superposition says otherwise, my
Well,
dude. There is a 0, a 1, and there is a 2, or rather a state that is both.
No, yes, that's what I was getting to.
Right, sorry.
The quantum superposition is exactly what's unlocking this new thing for us in the future.
It's it's the next tier, so to speak.
Yes, understanding that a thing that the poles are 1 and 0, but there's a spectrum in the middle. There's not just the superposition of 1 and 0. This is where, for example, I love the Chinese I Ching. The I Ching is an ancient Chinese book that called the Book of Changes, that describes the ways that yin and yang energies can be combined, and that creates changes between this state and that state of being. And it is a very perfect system. It's an art and a science, and it's the most perfect science I've ever discovered. It's the science of ones and zeros. And Gottfried Leibniz, the great German philosopher and scientist, invented the binary mathematics based upon I Ching. He read I Ching. Jesuit missionaries brought it back to Europe. They declared it to be the lost book of Enoch because it was so wise in its ways, and it contained such wisdom. They thought it must have come from God, and they reasoned that it was the lost book of Enoch, a book that had been lost for a very long time, but was reputed to be able to tell you the nature of anything, to have everything written in it. And what is everything written in the world? Binary. It's written in binary. The entire world, everything is. There's ones and zeros. They're just so tiny that we can't see them. And there is a superposition of them. And the superposition happens because of parallel universes. There's parallel universes of different observational qualities. So what's happening is that this entire simulation is run as software in the mind of God. It's not hardware. What we think of as hardware is not actually hard. It's soft. It's all software. Everything is software. The universe is software that is running on the computer of God's brain. God's mind runs this simulation for us. And if you look at the map of the universe, it looks very, very similar. They're the maps that astronomers are making of the universe. It looks very, very
like
similar to
maps.
Yes, they look like neurons.
Synapses, neurons. Yeah.
And it's because we live in a giant brain, and the brain that is infinite and contains all possibilities. So what defines the universe that you're in right now, that we're speaking together in, is defined by all of our collective choices. So all of us collectively have decided on this universe. And so that makes this the master universe. There are other universes, though, that exist or based on what people could have done. There are shadows of possibilities that are out there. So there's basically a cloud of all of these universes surrounding the Earth, of all the possible Earths that ever could be. But we live in, and the Master Universe is, the one Earth that is collectively agreed upon as this is the path we're going to take. So there's kind of a hive mind that goes on that trickles down. Everything in the universe is conscious because it exists within the mind of God. And God's consciousness restricts itself in a process that Jews call tzimtzum, which means constriction. It constricts itself like a thread coming into a circle. That the thread is like a lifeline. The constriction of God is such that we have like an umbilical cord to God. It's called, the people call it the silver cord or the astral cord.
I was about to say, it's the silver cord. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes to the navel chakra. And that is the actual method of human sustenance, let's say. There's that's not to say that you shouldn't eat food and drink water. God gives you those things so that you eat them. But the sustenance of life comes from an umbilical cord to God. But God doesn't want to restrict everyone by being an overmind to them. So he constricts himself down to a single little thread so that everyone has as much separation as they want from each other. And that allows us to be in a situation where we can actually love people, because we can spontaneously do things. We can spontaneously love people. We can spontaneously develop emotional characteristics. The crux of that is that everything that God does is love. Love is the power of the universe. It's the energy that drives the universe. It's the attractive force between molecules. Love is the power of things to be attracted to one another. So when two people make love, the people can see God. You could see God. The act of procreation is an act in which one becomes a co-creator with God, and you realize that you're actually co-creating at all moments and all times, because we all make choices, and those choices select which universe is the master universe.
Oh shit! I'm gonna have to drop out, boys.
No.
It's been a pleasure
Yes.
to meet and speak with you at last, Lex.
Yeah, it's been a great time. Thanks for letting me.
Man.
Thanks for letting me rant at you.
Oh no, not at all. I like listening to it. It's good, and I have nothing to say because I'm just sat here agreeing the fuck out of you. So it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Hence my not said anything for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But I'll catch you guys later on. I'm gonna go and take a call with these boys.
Yeah. Well,
So,
let's make sure to let's
Have
make
a
sure
lovely
to
afternoon.
let's try to share this video with people because I think that the conversation is an important one that lots of people would benefit from hearing.
Oh, and more so now than at any other time.
Exactly. So let's try our best to share and show love to our fellow human beings. Love you guys, and you guys have a nice day. All right.
Yeah, you have a good afternoon, guys.
It is, man. You sticking about for a bit, Lex?
Yeah, I'll stick around a little bit.
Okay. So I've been saying not saying much for a long time, and it's basically as Will says, I've been agreeing with a lot of things you've had to say. One thing I've been thinking about that seems to be a bit of a consistent, come up a few times across this conversation is initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of different tiers of understanding what initiation is and how it works or how it's being applied.
Yeah.
I think we could probably agree that it's a sequence of experiences that lead you to looking at the world in a new way is what an initiation is, sort of.
Yeah, that's a very good description.
In general terms.
It's a very good description.
What I think is going on with the China situation and the global sort of consciousness in general is that I think it's complicated. Trying to order my thoughts here. There's individual initiation, but I think we've got a collective consciousness, not in sort of the Jungian's, subconscious mind, but the culture. Culture is a collective expression of consciousness, and the culture needs initiating. So you have to sort of, it's from that Bob Wilson idea about the mental age of the population, and that's what the culture is. So the more sophisticated the culture, the higher the mental age of the population that support that culture. And I think this whole China situation, the coronavirus situation, is part of the global community, the global culture initiation. And it's like the whole world's gone into retreat. The cultural zeitgeist has gone into spiritual retreat as part of this lockdown.
That's exactly right.
So there's a lot of soul searching and stuff is going to go on among the individuals, but it's the individuals that make up the culture, and the culture will come out more sophisticated as a result.
And I think that
makes any sense.
I think that the process is one of disclosing the fact that there is a celestial government. There's a government above Earth, it's above our pay grade, so to speak. We don't have anything to do with them because they just don't have much to do with us. But we're becoming.
I think it's like in the same way as in Star Trek when you've got your warp drive barrier. Until you hit the warp drive barrier, there's a prime directive of non-interference, and I think there's something equivalent to that going on. I don't think that idea was invented by Gene Roddenberry. I think he discovered that idea because it's an actual principle that exists in reality.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, is that it might not be a warp barrier when the aliens come and make contact, but whatever the barrier is, I think you have to cross it together as a planet. And I think if one culture on the planet steps up individually, then they maybe say, nah, man, that doesn't meet the grade. If you're willing to leave behind your brothers and sisters on your planet to join us, then you're not worthy of the club. So, and that maybe is what was happening in Germany in the 1930s, is that Germany was going to level up and go next tier. They were ready to breach into space.
Yeah.
And they got told, no, man, you're not allowed to step up and leave everyone else behind. You're going to get squashed down, and everybody's going to come up together. And so having that in the back of my mind is why I think all the powers that be, the control groups behind the scenes, I think they're ultimately working in the human collective benefit. I think they're ultimately the good guys. We have some hard lessons as part of this cultural initiation before we're ready to level up as a planet.
I think that that's a very apt description. Very, very apt, indeed. The the crux of World War II is exactly what you said. It was basically, um, it was almost a rebellion. Hitler rebelled against this idea that humans were not allowed to decide their own fate. Um, this because there's a plan. So it was, in that sense, it was a rebellion against God. It was, and so a holy offering was made. The offering, the Holocaust. Holocaust means burnt offering. It's in Greek. It's Greek for burnt offering. That one that is offered in the Torah. And um, the Torah is the blueprint of the world. So a burnt offering was made to appease God. The and the Jews were willing to do that because they're God's people and they love God. And so people go through all this, and they think, the Holocaust is fake. It's not real. That's partially true, um, because they had to invent the idea of it. They had to poison the well of water that everyone drank from, so that the village would band together. Basically,
Yeah,
the
yeah. There's a lot of ways to sort of slice and interpret it, but I can see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, it basically was a poisoning of the tree of life. Because our creation myth of the modern world, the creation myth of the modern world, is essentially a negative one, and it is the creation myth of the end of World War II. The end of World,
Which is a really interesting thing that I've only heard from you, and I think that is a really, really interesting idea that World War II is our mythical history. That's our backstory, our origin story.
Yeah, it is. It is our mythical history. Um, all history is mythical. If people may not understand this, but myths and legends are real things, and mythical beings and mythical things do happen, and it's because myths are archetypes. Myths are archetypal things that are set up in the consciousness of God, and that since God's consciousness is what the universe is running on, essentially, the grass that grows is the grass that is familiar to God's mind. It's
a system of habit.
Exactly. So there's certain habitual properties that reoccur again and again, um, and it's in every age. There comes a self-sacrifice. In the end, the person who is sacrificed sacrifices himself for the cause, and people don't realize it, but the Jews did that in World War II. They basically sacrificed themselves for the cause of bringing about world peace eventually. And that promise is one of the most powerful things that you can think of. That promise is promise of God, a person who never breaks promises. He promised the Jews, if you do this, everything will be okay, and we will we will be able to achieve great future. But there is people suffered to a degree relative to their sinfulness. If someone had no sins, there was not much suffering. But if a person was extremely sinful, then there was much suffering. And that is simply the way that God's justice works. And there's nothing really more to say about that.
Yeah, I'm undecided how I feel about the idea of sort of. It's almost like a karmic repercussions, isn't it? With the say, if you sin more, you due more suffering.
Right.
I'm not totally convinced there is sort of a personal scorecard that, you know, even across your lifetime or across many lifetimes.
Yeah.
I think it's more. I mean, personally, I can't claim to know this, but
It's not a
personally,
scorecard, but
if
well,
that if you sin, there's more evil in the immediate environment. You know, it's not that it'll necessarily come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
It's, you know, back to the idea that everybody is an expression of God, and if you put hateful ideas out, everybody, anywhere that hate can land, is on God. Everything is God, and it's all ultimately you as well. So it's not that, you know, if Dave sins down the line, Dave's going to pay for it. It's that if Dave sins, Dave's already paying for it in the form of everybody who he sins against.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that's exactly correct. It's basically the law of karma that is so misunderstood is precisely the law of cause and effect. That anything that has a cause will have an effect, and that effect will be a cause for a new effect. So there is a rippling that takes place from any action, that any action at all influences the entire web, the entire network. This is something called Indra's net, and it's the what people talk about a holographic universe. What a hologram is something that if you cut any of its parts, you cut any of its parts, separate it, the entire hologram will still be present in the smaller parts.
Right.
So the holographic nature of the universe and the Hindus understood this and gave us the concept of Indra's net. Indra's net is a network of nodes where each node has all the information that all the others
It reflects all the others.
Yeah. Right. Each one has infinite information.
I think I heard.
And I have proof of this. I can prove it to you. And I can prove it to you because if you draw a circle, then you can derive the number phi, and you can derive the number pi. You can derive phi also from drawing a rectangle and trying to find the perfect ratio, the golden rectangle. In doing so, you prove through geometry that infinity exists, because pi is a number that can be calculated to any number of digits you want, but it will never repeat itself. It's always new, it's novel, it will never be 77777 forever. It always repeats and something new comes out of it. That's a random seed. It's what's called a random seed in computer science. What you use it to generate randomness, and that's basically. Einstein said, "I refuse to believe that God plays with dice." Um,
Yeah.
but I think God does play with dice, and he doesn't. He knows what the outcome's going to be, but the it's like when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's like you know that the heroes are going to win, but the you know you're going to have fun. You know, like you're the player.
Yeah.
You know you're going to have fun. It's just like a matter of how you do it, and how you do it is with the element of chance, having some fun with randomness, having some fun.
It wouldn't be fun if there wasn't immersion and risk.
Yeah,
So, it's why life is the way it is.
yeah, and God is a gambler. God is a gambler, dude. God plays poker. Like,
Yeah.
God is the chillest dude around. The people don't even understand. God loves them so much. He loves them. He thinks they're hilarious. He thinks their jokes always land with God. They're like he thinks it's funny. He gets it. He's the one who understands you. So that's the truth, is that everyone is connected to that. They're connected to that network. And each one of them is an infinity in themselves. Every human is an infinity. You can go infinitely down into the molecules, the atoms, and keep going down until eventually you reach the binary code. Whatever particle is down there, there's going to eventually just be a particle that it either is or isn't, and that's the basis of reality. Blank. Either it is or it isn't.
Mad. Get down to waves and subatomic particles, and all there is a Planck length waveform, and there's either a packet of energy or there isn't, and there's your binary. Yeah, but it's all made out of the energy in the empty space. It is mad that matter, when you look close enough, matter isn't real. It's energy and principles, which are, well, it's mad. Boggles the mind.
Yeah, but that means that our mind is actually very powerful, and our voices are even more powerful, because the voice is the tool or method that a human being uses to transform thought into physical vibration. And by putting a physical vibration into the universe, you can think something and it can go away. But if you say something, it vibrates forever. It's out there.
Yeah.
And so that's why people say, watch your language, watch your tongue, be careful what you say. You have to be careful with your speech.
It's also, I think, why ritual magic is a thing, why ceremonial ceremony and ritual have a place.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just meditate on what you want. If you take a refined form of those meditations and express it in the physical universe, then you've made it real. You've turned your idea and put it into the physical environment.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But just by saying it, casting a spell or whatever, just saying the words out loud, making an open declaration of your intent, and it takes an internal reflection that can rattle around and it can vary over. Sit and meditate on something, and your exact thinking, your opinion on the thing might change over the course of the meditation. So it's a good job that those thoughts weren't directly influencing reality, because you've got to have the opportunity to change your mind. But once you've sort of settled on what you think, if you can express it in the physical environment, I think there's an effect there. Something happens. You're associating the concept that you've meditated on with the result that you're now expressing in the physical environment. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not expressing myself properly, but you're moving it from the mental into the physical, as you say, like through speech. You take an abstract concept that exists in the non-local mind or wherever it exists, and manifesting it in physical reality. initially in the form of spoken word, but those vibrations of sound in the physical plane are going to rattle around and maybe recombine at some point in the effect you wanted.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's reassuring. On the same page.
Yeah, the system of the universe is a very beautiful structure. It's incredibly beautiful. The structure of, and I marvel at it every day, and that's why I just think I just want to go outside. I just want to go live. And who cares about a virus? Live or die. I just want to go live. I just want to go. Just want to have my life. And it's like I could cough myself to death. That's okay, but I want to have lived while doing it. There's no real end. The death is not really the end that people think it is. It's because consciousness is real, and because it's God's consciousness. When someone dies, the idea of them doesn't die. They're spiritually alive. They're spiritually still there. They're spiritually and intellectually alive. But the body passes into a state of decomposition, which is also a state of life. The body doesn't actually pass into something that's dead in the sense of nothing happening. The body passes into a different stage of life, which is the stage of decomposition. And in decomposition, then we have the bloom of algae, or in the oceans. We have the bloom of our microbiome of the gut that basically takes over, and more than half the cells of your body are bacteria and viruses or things that are not.
But and what you think of as a human body, there's only 1 in 3 of the cells are actually human cells, and it's mostly microbiome and viruses and all these other much smaller cells actually make up numerically most of your cells.
Yeah,
and not even you.
And that means that you are an ecosystem. Your body is an enclosed ecosystem that's in a state called stasis. Stasis means stability. It's in a stable state until you die, and then you go into a state eventually called anastasis, or Anastasia, as the name of the Russian princess. Anastasia means to be resurrected, to be returned to stasis. And a return to stasis is inevitable, as well as the loss of stasis. It's a sine wave. It's a wave that goes up, and then when it reaches the 0 point, now you've reached the point of decomposition. You begin to decompose, and you reach the bottom point, and then you start to go up again. You start to coalesce. You coalesce, and then when you reach the 0 point, you come out the womb. You go into the world
again.
Yep, and it happens again and again. That's the vibratory wave, and the wave changes characteristics in certain ways. I think my cat is scratching to get in. But she was. But the characteristics and ways that the world works are beautiful. I mean, they're just very. It's the most elegant system imaginable, and that's why God uses it. the most elegant operating system.
Go back to something you said a minute ago about the fact that your microbiome is so complex and that there's so many non-human cells in what you think of as yourself. I think that's analogous to what I was saying about the culture. That the culture is alive and it's made up of the individuals that comprise it.
Absolutely.
In the same way that what you think of as yourself is the sum of your component parts, all those, your microbiome, the bacteria that live on your skin and everything, and your human cells, and the specialist different human cells, the organs and stuff that all make up together. They're a very complex system that you think of as me, yourself. And I think that scales up, and that when you get a collection of these cells, they're like the bacteria in your microbiome, where all the microbiome of the cultural body, if that makes sense. And that scales, I think it scales up and down.
Yeah.
So, and your individual cells probably consider themselves selves to an extent, not in the same. They don't have the same, cerebral hardware to represent that version of themselves.
It's exactly the same, actually. I think it's precisely the same.
The cell, to be able to self-regulate itself, it's got to know what's in the cell and what's outside the cell and what it wants inside the cell and what it needs to extrude. It's got to have wants and dislikes and stuff. It's basically got to be self-aware to function as a cell.
Yeah.
But obviously not self-aware in the same way that you think of yourself as self-aware, because we've got this cerebral hardware to express it.
Yeah, people don't
cell
even
doesn't, but
people don't even realize that they're basically a colony of trillions of cells, and the trillions of cells, the colony is like a vast universe of its own. That each one of those cells is like an individual, and this is reflected on every level. Every level this happens, that there's a coalescence around something because of its gravity. The force of love, the force of attraction, draws things to it, and things begin to coalesce around something. That force is the same force that drives atoms and electrons, and the same force that drives galaxies and superclusters, and the same force that drives human body, the heart, the blood, all the organs of the body.
It's like want. It's like when you're hungry, you want food, and when you're thirsty, you want drink. But whatever the thing is that you want, it's the want that drives you. In the same way, I think things lifted off the ground want to fall. They want to obey the laws of gravity the same way that you want to obey the laws of conservation of energy and needing to eat to refuel your activities.
Yeah. Needing. That's how it works. Everything is interconnected, and everything is part of this vast web. There's nothing that exists, in a vacuum. That's the definition of a vacuum, is that nothing exists in it. There's a true vacuum is almost impossible to find. There's nanoparticles out in space everywhere, and they interact with each other to some degree, and that degree is very, very, very small compared to the degree that, for example, sound waves propagate in air very well. Sound waves would propagate extremely poorly through space to the point that you couldn't hear anything. But the principle is the same, that the substrate exists that waves can move through.
Which is weird for light, because you can propagate light waves through a vacuum, but it doesn't need a medium the same way that sound waves need a medium to propagate through. fucking weird, man.
Because they are, yeah, because they are them. Light is itself a particle, a particle and a wave, and it's like
Yeah,
that's the light is that's one of the most interesting things in the world. To me, is light,
yeah, yeah. I'd agree with that.
and that was the first creation of God. That was the very first creation of God in Genesis. People should read carefully Genesis, in the beginning of God's creation of heaven, of the heavens and um, the earth was without form and void, and God's spirit moved on the face of the waters. God's spirit is ruach in Hebrew, means breath. God's breath moves on the face of the waters. This causes a
Which
rippling
makes a
effect.
wave. That's interesting. I've not really thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a wave, it makes a ripple, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was. How profound is that?
Yeah, it's more so than your materialist scientific atheist type might be very happy to dismiss it all, but I think there is deep value in accuracy in it.
Absolutely.
Even in the fundamental principle that it moves from a basic state to a more complex state. You don't start with the trees and then invent the light. It's obviously understood that things were more primitive or without form or whatever, and then things got more complex over time. And out of the works of day one, you can then build the works of day two, and so on. And I think the physical universe kind of invented itself in that way. And that if the physical universe is almost like the hardware that the mind of God runs on, if that makes sense. The hardware produces the software, and the software produces the hardware. It's this self-referencing system that is the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the successes of day one enable the works of day two, and the successes of the work of day two enable the work of day three. And that has continued all the way up to now. And I wonder about the evolutionary history of the planet and whether the works of the mycelium in the early formation of the Earth enabled biology to exist, and stuff like that. And now the works of biology are enabling culture to exist. And then, in the future, cultures interacting will be able to, there'll be this, a tier above it. There'll be this new behavioral patterning.
I mean,
I don't know.
yeah.
I can't even think of a name.
You'll have a cultural sphere, and then your cultural sphere of influence. For example, Bollywood in India, they have a very good. They make some great movies in Bollywood. It's I mean, the name is a ripoff of Hollywood. It's pretty funny,
Mhm.
but they Bollywood is has a cultural sphere of influence that is much smaller than Hollywood. Hollywood's sphere of influence
Yeah,
goes.
well, you say that. I'd be interested to hear in terms of numbers, because there's not many people in India that, even if the Bollywood effect stays more within India, there's a fucking lot of people there.
That's true. They could have. I mean, over 1 billion people. So
Yeah, which is bad.
yeah, it's crazy to think.
A population like that can live on just India boggles my mind. The fact that they exist without destroying themselves,
yeah,
I think, is incredible. That
Well, I
population.
don't know if without destroying themselves is an accurate.
yeah.
Fair one.
The the state of India, I don't know. I have not been to India, but not recently anyway. Not in this body. So but the state of India seems to be improving. I hope. But my point about cultural sphere. well, there's the Anglo-American cultural sphere, and then but there are other cultural spheres. Was my point? Is that, for example, Bollywood is a good example, or even if you look at China. So an interesting thing has happened. I was reading about this movie that was made. An American Chinese or Chinese American woman went to China and made a movie about her experiences as a Chinese American, and then released it in China, and Chinese people hated it, absolutely hated it, just didn't care because our like gender equality issues and race issues and stuff, like that's all bullshit to them. That's all bullshit, and they don't care about that. And so in their media, how they see America, their number one, like the movie that sells number one over there is the Avengers. The Avengers overseas killed it with earnings, because everyone, and that's America's, the Anglo-American sphere. That's the cultural image. So, that's what people reference. So if people are like, name a beautiful woman, people are like, oh, Scarlett Johansson. If someone says, who should they cast for that part? And people go, oh, the funny guy, Chris Pratt. It's because they're in the center of that cultural sphere, which is a very interesting phenomenon. But then when you look at a metasphere of cultures, you could say that there's an entire Earth culture. There's an entire culture of being a certain way on Earth, and there's an entire culture of being a certain way on any other planet, where there are spiritual beings and maybe not physical beings. There's culture everywhere and in everything, and in your body. Your bacteria has a culture. It's called bacterial culture. It's there's a literal culture of your bacteria. So culture exists everywhere at all levels.
Yeah, I suppose to sort of, yeah, I would certainly agree with that. To go back and maybe clarify something I said earlier about the global culture, you could argue that as Stone Age ape men, we were as a unified global culture. We're all playing the same social game. We're all, as Alan Watts said, that the game ought to go on. Is the survival game is what we're all playing. Everything that lives on Earth, effectively. But then we've got this sort of refined. Well, I don't know if you'd even call it refined. It's for our entertainment only, maybe. But this sort of human culture, that does vary from place to place. Whatever it is that is different in social norms in England versus America versus China. You've got that sort of culture, that sort of what you'd normally think of as culture. But yeah, I can certainly agree that basically everything is culture. Any patterns of behaviour anywhere, a degree of culture to an extent.
I mean, patterns of behavior. That's a perfect way to describe it. People have patterns. There's a pattern to the universe. There's a fractal pattern to the universe, and that fractal pattern is the culture that exists everywhere. That's the thing that exists. That's the common. So when you're talking about culture, and it's a matter of common denominator and where you want to draw the line. You can draw the lines at any point that you want. It's a blank canvas. So you can, and that's true of all things. You can say, what do you want to consider yourself? Do you consider your cat to be yourself? Do Do you consider yourself to own a cat? I have my cat right next to me. That's why I'm saying about a cat. But you could see that. Someone could say that's part of me being myself is that I have a cat. And so that cat nature enters into their human nature, and their self expands, their sense of self expands. And people look at their life in that sense, where every aspect of their life is a reflection of an inner aspect of their self. That's actually true. Is that if you look out at the world, everything around you that you can look at and see and touch anywhere is an expression of who you are. And that's why you're at your particular spot, at your particular place, at your particular time. That's why you're sitting here right now talking to me. That's why you're not someone else. Is because there's a very specific way that you like to define yourself. And that is the freedom that God has given to the people. And that's what people mean by free will. You can determine and bring in or put out of your life anything that you want. You just have to ask. Asking ye shall receive. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be open for you. Until you start asking, no one's going to give you anything. Until you start seeking, you're never going to find anything. And until you knock on the door, no one's going to know that you're out there in the cold. So, ask, seek, and knock.
And I think there's another sort of way of interpreting those words would be that it's how thinking works. Where do your thoughts come from? Unless you consider a subject, you're never going to know about it. And you know that if you ask yourself a question on the nature of myself, or, you know, and that grammar was bad, but whatever, you know what I mean. Your mind isn't going to present yourself with the answers to these questions unless you ask it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
The whole process of thinking is like that. Some of that's really boggled and blown my mind over the time that I've been considering is just how thinking works. Where do these ideas come from? How when I ask a certain metaphysical question when I'm meditating on it or something, how does my brain know to give me? How does it know what's associated with that? How does it know to give me answers that are in any way related to the question that I've asked? And the fact that it manages to do that, I think, is fucking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, it really is. It really is crazy. It's amazing. It's amazing what can happen in the world. It's amazing. Just this morning, I made a stupid GoFundMe page. This is a comedy idea I had. Was start a GoFundMe page that's going to be as on the nose as possible, like just completely exactly what everyone thinks it is. It has no pretensions whatsoever. It's exactly what it is. And it's so I titled it "Give Me $1 Million," and I wrote this whole thing about, like, I'm a cancerous piece of shit and you should give me your money because I'm entitled to it, and please just give it to me because I need it and I want it, and please give it to me. And we're gonna see we're gonna see if it works. And I have a good April Fool's Day plan too.
It's funny because it might work if people. It depends how the first So, well, if people start to donate a small amount because it's funny, a lot of people can donate a small amount for a laugh, and then suddenly you've got $1 million, and you're like, "Holy shit, that works!"
Yeah,
it could.
it could work, and it's like if it does, then that's just proof of what we're saying here, and then we would be able to spread this message to everyone in the world. We could spread it anywhere.
What would you do with it if you got the $1 million? What would you do?
What I would do is I would create a video production company. I would travel around the world and I would record people telling their life stories about the history of their people. And I would go around and study every people on Earth as long as I could be alive. That's what I would do if I had $1 million.
And that would be really interesting.
Yeah,
and given the resources, I think I'd be inclined to do something similar.
Yeah,
that would be really interesting.
I would make that my life mission to document and to give to posterity as much information about us and the past as we can. And so go to each of these places. You know what they never show on a show on the History Channel about Egypt? They never have them just talking to people in Egypt on the street and asking them, what do you think about the pyramids?
Yeah, that's true.
Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen anyone ask an Egyptian person in Cairo on the street, what do you think about the Sphinx over there? Do you think there's something buried underneath it? What do you think about do you think that there's a record house? And then listen to their legends out of their own mouths and not tell people about them, but show people and let them tell their own stories. And that's what I would do with that money. That's the real truth of it. But the joke of it is funny to me to just say, I want money because I want money.
Yeah, that would be really funny to actually, because you've done good works and put good works out, and they haven't found a massive paying audience. So if this appeal to you there was the one that paid off, I think that would be. I don't know. It'd certainly be funny.
God has a very funny sense.
Just a bit sort of thing.
Yeah, God has a very funny sense of humor. Really, he does. He has a very funny sense of humor. And anyone who's watching this, like, if you could just even throw like $1 or 50 cents in there, the thing is that if people see that other people are donating to it, herd mentalities will take over. Herd mentality will take over. And that's how humans work. We're tribal animals. We're herd animals. And we run in packs, We have a certain way that we like to do that. We have our group of friends and family that are the people that we know in an area. And that group is, in this day and age, you guys are my friends and family. Every one of you touches my life, and I touch your lives, and we affect each other. Our conversations affect each other. Our moods affect each other. And good things that happen to us affect each other. Bad things that happen to us affect each other. And so everything that we do as an interconnected web of people is a blessing to everyone, or a curse to everyone. What people don't understand about giving is that giving is actually probably more. It gives more to the person giving it than to the person receiving it. If you receive a gift, then it's almost like you're receiving a debt. You know,
Yeah. Shit, I hear this guy.
this is the concept of money. We're entering into the modern concept of money. But if someone gives you something, it's almost like that's a mark of debt. But they have surplus. They have benefit. They are up. You are down. In up and down, not literal. I'm meaning this in the yin and yang terms. So the receiver is yin and the giver is yang, and in that sense, the giver actually receives more than the receiver in the end, because when they put out that vibration, positive vibration, it creates more positivity in the environment, and there's almost a snowball or avalanching effect of positivity, that the more positivity you have, the more momentum you're going to gain in going down this hill of life. Sisyphus is trying to roll a boulder up a hill, but it's much easier to roll a boulder down a hill. So hell is trying to roll the boulder up, and heaven is letting the boulder roll down and snowball.
And with the flow.
And that's God's magic at work. Yin and Yang actually have a yin and yang in Chinese. The characters, the logograms that are used for them, they have the character for hill, and then one has light and one has darkness, and so the literal meaning of yin and yang is the light side of the hill and the dark side of the hill. Because Chinese people notice that on the light side of a hill, the grass will grow taller and greener. And on the dark side of the hill, things will not grow as well. So the two sides of the hill are the two energies, the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative. The negative always exists, but the positive can always move through it. That's the way that space works. You know, empty space is just an empty space. You can always move through it. So negativity is something that you can always move through. Positivity is something that gains momentum and snowballs itself. And the combination of those two things, that's the very basis of the philosophy of I Ching. The philosophy of the Book of Changes. I think that it, it's crazy enough, it just might work. Just might work.
Start to intermittently lose the audio a little bit.
I was wondering about that. Sorry about that, Dave.
All right.
I think probably I will wrap this up now, just because I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I was just thinking that was. What point do we conclude? Is there? Well, yeah, we'll speak again, no doubt. I'm sure I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been.
Yeah,
immensely...
I was going to say, is there anything you want to mention briefly? But we'll just leave it. We'll do another one. we'll think of all sorts of things to discuss and do another one.
Yeah. We'll just do another one. Someday I'm going to come visit you over there in England. I'm going to fly over there. And,
Yeah, well, looking forward to it. We'll have a jam, play some banjo.
yeah, well, when my Trump bucks come in, maybe I'll just get a passport and go over to England for a while.
Yeah, I'll social distancing. I won't be able to let you in the house.
Well, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
No.
All right, man. Well, it was good to talk to you. Love you, brother.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, good to speak, man. And yeah, have a good one. Take it easy.
Take it easy, man. Now, just to end the stream, I will play us a prayer on. Thank you, and God bless. Have a wonderful rest of your day. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.